The calm before the storm. The galaxy had enjoyed 3,000 years of peace. Not a single shot had been fired in anger. The Galactic Council, a powerful alliance of different alien species, had controlled the vast reaches of space with an iron grip, enforcing laws, peace, and order. In every corner of the universe, harmony reigned. The warlords, the rebels, and the conquerors. Those were stories from the past, long forgotten in the face of peace. Humanity, however, was considered an afterthought. Earth was far from the Council's watchful eyes, a small and insignificant speck in the grand scale of the galaxy. Humans were seen as primitive beings, barely advanced enough to interact with the greater galactic civilization. Their technology was ancient, their political systems divided, and their global conflicts seemed endless. To the Council, humanity was nothing more than a forgotten myth, an old, unsolved puzzle that didn't even deserve a passing glance. For centuries, Earth had been left to its own devices, watched from afar, but ignored for the most part. It wasn't that the Council had any particular disdain for humans. It was simply that Earth's situation seemed hopelessly out of sync with the galactic advancements. The Council's peace was built on the idea that no species could challenge their control, and with Earth in its own corner of the universe, it was no threat to the order they had created. Then, on an ordinary day, everything changed. The Council made an announcement, a declaration that sent ripples across the galaxy. They were going to war. Not against another alien empire, not against a threat to the galaxy's stability, but against humanity. A species they had long dismissed, a race they had considered nothing more than a fleeting legend. The news spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, news networks and commanders scrambled to understand why the Council had made such a radical decision. Why would they go to war with humans, of all beings? The thought seemed absurd. Everyone knew Earth was a backward world, hardly capable of defending itself. There were no great fleets of warships, no vast armies. What possible reason could there be to attack a race so far removed from the galactic order? At first, it didn't make sense. The leaders of the galactic worlds watched with skepticism. Surely this was some mistake, a miscommunication, perhaps a misunderstanding. But as the hours ticked by, the truth became undeniable. The Galactic Council was serious. They had just declared war on humanity. Across the universe, the rest of the galaxy wondered why. What had Earth done to provoke such an action? But Earth itself had no idea what was coming. Its leaders had long focused inward, dealing with their own struggles, political division, technological growth, and environmental crisis. The idea that the rest of the galaxy had even been watching seemed far-fetched until now. The humans, as usual, were divided. Some laughed at the news, scoffing at the idea of an intergalactic empire targeting their home. They were just humans, after all. What threat could they possibly pose? Others were more concerned. What if it was true? What if the Council really was planning something? What if the humans had been overlooked for far too long? On Earth, the news hit like a thunderstorm. Governments scrambled to assess the situation, trying to gather information from every corner of the world. The people, confused, frightened, angry, could not understand. Earth had been isolated for so long. Why now? Why would the peaceful Council suddenly change course and target humanity? What had happened? And more importantly, what would happen next? The world's leaders met in secrecy, discussing the possible ramifications of such a declaration. They knew their military forces were no match for the Council's fleets. They had no great space programs. The thought of defending against such a mighty galactic force was laughable. But something was off. Humanity was not as weak as the Council believed. As the days passed, the situation grew more tense. Earth's scientists, engineers, and military experts worked furiously to understand what was happening. But they were kept in the dark. The Galactic Council had made its move, and no one, not even Earth's brightest minds, could understand why. But there was a glimmer of something else, a whisper in the dark, an undercurrent of fear and uncertainty spreading through the galaxy. Deep within Earth's secret underground facilities, long-forgotten programs that no one outside the government had ever heard of were being revived. These were not just weapons of war. They were part of a deeper, older secret. Humanity's true power had been hidden for centuries. The Council had made a grave mistake. On Earth, there were whispers of a fleet, ancient, powerful, and unseen by the rest of the galaxy. A fleet of ships so enormous and so deadly that even the Galactic Council, with all its might, would be no match. But no one outside of a select few knew about it. It had been buried deep in Earth's history, lost to time. But now, the time had come. The true nature of humanity, its untapped potential, was about to be revealed. And the Council would soon learn a terrifying truth. Humanity was not as weak as they thought. In the quiet corners of the galaxy, the seeds of war had been sown. What had once seemed like a peaceful, steady galaxy was now on the brink of chaos. The calm before the storm had been shattered, and the universe would never be the same again. The war had begun, and humanity was about to prove that it was not to be underestimated. The storm was coming. The calm had been broken. The galaxy was about to witness something they had never seen before, the rise of humanity. And no one, not even the Galactic Council, could stop it. Unseen forces awaken. The moment the Galactic Council declared war on humanity, something changed. Earth was thrust into a situation it had never expected. An existential threat from the vast empire that governed the stars. Yet, amid the panic and confusion, there were a few who knew something the rest of the world did not. Something that had been hidden for centuries, lying dormant, waiting for the right time to awaken. As news of the declaration spread across the world, governments scrambled to prepare, but their efforts felt like a mere drop in the ocean compared to the might of the Galactic Council. Earth's military, despite its size and the strength of its nations, could not match the superior technology and vast fleets of the Council. There was no way to fight a war of this magnitude, or so it seemed. Yet, deep beneath the surface, a much darker and more powerful force stirred. On the surface, humanity's response was chaotic. The governments held meetings, military leaders issued statements, and civilians wondered what they could do. Fear spread like wildfire. The idea of an all-out war against the Galactic Council was overwhelming. The question on everyone's mind was simple: why us? To many, it seemed as though humanity was being targeted because of their insignificance. They weren't a spacefaring race like others. Their technology, their fleets, were centuries behind those of the galactic powers. The whole situation seemed absurd. Why would the Council, the peaceful overlords of the galaxy, attack a race that posed no real threat? But behind closed doors, some knew the truth. The Council had seen humanity as weak, a relic of a bygone age, but that perception was about to be shattered. There was a reason why Earth had been left in relative isolation for so long, and it wasn't because the humans weren't capable. It was because they were far more capable than the rest of the galaxy had ever realized. The Galactic Council had deliberately overlooked humanity's power, convinced that the humans were too divided, too primitive, to pose any real threat. That was their first mistake. At the heart of this secret was a project that had begun long before Earth had even made its first journey into space, a project so vast, so secretive, that not even the brightest minds of humanity had known its full scope. Buried deep within Earth's underground bunkers, hidden in the oceans and remote deserts, was a fleet, an ancient fleet, built in the earliest days of Earth's space programs. This fleet had been designed for a single purpose: to protect humanity from an unknown future. And now, that future had arrived. The fleet had been hidden away for centuries, its existence known only to a select few. As Earth's governments scrambled to find answers, these hidden operatives were the first to realize the significance of the Council's declaration. The time for hiding was over. One by one, secret communications were made. The hidden factions within Earth's governments, military leaders, and scientists were called into action. They had long prepared for a day like this, when Earth would be forced to reveal its true power. The fleet, powerful beyond belief, was ready for activation. But this was no ordinary fleet. Unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever seen, these ships were not just war machines. They were ancient and intelligent, possessing technology so advanced that even the Council's best engineers would struggle to comprehend them. These were not ships created for the convenience of war. They were created for survival. Designed to outlast the most advanced alien weapons and fleets, they were built for resilience, stealth, and overwhelming force. The fleet had been designed with one ultimate goal in mind: to ensure humanity's survival at any cost. The order was given, and the fleet's dormant systems began to hum to life. Powerful engines fired up, and communications relays activated. In secret facilities hidden from the public eye, construction teams that had worked for years in isolation were now tasked with preparing these ships for their final mission. For the first time, humanity's true potential was about to be revealed to the galaxy. The Galactic Council, who had dismissed Earth as weak and inconsequential, was about to witness the power of the species they had underestimated for so long. The fleet would rise in the shadows, invisible to the Council's sensors at first, but when it struck, it would strike with a force that would leave the galaxy trembling. But Earth had no intention of starting a war. The fleet was not a tool for conquest. It was a shield, a means to protect their world from the overwhelming threat of the Galactic Council. Humanity had been left alone for too long, but they were no longer powerless. As the fleet began to move, the tension grew across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had just made its first move, and now Earth was preparing for its counterattack. But what the Council didn't realize was that the humans they had long dismissed were not the same as they once were. The peaceful race they had overlooked had been quietly preparing for a day like this, and now that day had come. The calm before the storm was over. The war was no longer a question of if, but when. And soon, the Galactic Council would understand that Earth was no longer a planet to be underestimated. The Council's underestimation. The Galactic Council, spread across the stars and boasting vast fleets of their own, had been operating under a simple assumption: Earth was insignificant. This was a mistake they would soon regret, but at this point, they were still blind to the storm that was coming their way. Earth had been quiet for centuries, and in their eyes, this peace was a sign of weakness. They had no idea what humanity was truly capable of. The Council had always seen themselves as the rulers of the galaxy, unchallenged and unthreatened. The powerful species they governed were advanced, technologically superior, and seemingly invincible. They had always prided themselves on their ability to peacefully manage the galaxy's affairs, solving disputes and overseeing trade and diplomacy. But in their arrogance, they overlooked a small, forgotten planet on the edge of the galaxy. Earth. They had kept it isolated, believing it to be a primitive world, still struggling with their wars and conflicts, their technology centuries behind the stars. A few human explorers had ventured into space, but the Council didn't think much of them. Humanity's small fleet of vessels was seen as a relic of an ancient past, outdated and easily ignored. Now, the Galactic Council had made a grave mistake. Their decision to declare war on humanity was driven by one thing: fear. Fear that humanity, in its raw potential, could one day rise to challenge their rule. They had no idea that the fleet they mocked, the fleet they thought was insignificant, was actually a force unlike any other in the galaxy. As the Council's decision rippled across the stars, their military leaders and strategists began preparing for a swift victory. They assumed the human forces would be easily defeated. They planned to land on Earth, crush its defenses, and show the galaxy once again that the Galactic Council was invincible. But what they didn't anticipate was the resistance that was about to rise. Deep within their command centers, the Council's generals and admirals looked over the intelligence reports. Earth's military had no spacefaring fleets, no advanced technology, and no significant resources to withstand an invasion. The human population was divided. their forces scattered, and their leaders unsure of how to unite against such an overwhelming threat. Everything pointed to a quick, one-sided victory. But what the Council failed to understand was that Earth's military had been lying in wait for centuries. They had spent years building something the Galactic Council could never have imagined, a fleet of unimaginable power, kept secret and dormant for as long as humanity had existed. As the Galactic Council moved forward with their invasion plans, their spies and scouts roamed the galaxy, searching for any signs of Earth's defenses. They found nothing. Earth's governments were quiet. The planet's space stations and outposts were unremarkable. From their vantage point, there was nothing to suggest that Earth was anything but a harmless, isolated planet. They could not have been more wrong. Back on Earth, the decision had already been made. The fleet was ready. The project, known to only a few select individuals, had been a lifelong endeavor, started when the first space pioneers took their first steps into the unknown. Humanity's true strength had been built on their ingenuity, on their ability to adapt, and most of all, on their unity when faced with an existential threat. Earth had always been divided in countless ways, but when the time came for the survival of their species, they could always find a way to unite. In the hidden bunkers and underground facilities, the leaders who had been chosen to oversee the fleet's activation now watched as their creation was unleashed. Powerful ships, hidden for generations, began to emerge from their secret locations. Each ship was a marvel of human engineering, sleek, fast, and deadly. But it wasn't just the ships that would change the game. It was the technology within them. The systems so advanced they could not be understood by the Galactic Council. These were not just vessels of war. They were intelligent ships, each with their own AI, designed to think and adapt on the battlefield. Unlike the simple, standardized warships of the Galactic Council, these ships were unpredictable and dangerous. They could fight, think, and learn in real time. The Council's fleets, while vast and powerful, were no match for this kind of strategy. The Galactic Council had made its move, but in doing so, they had awoken something they never expected, Earth's true potential. And as the first ships began to take flight, those who were watching from Earth's shadow knew this was the beginning of something far greater than anyone had anticipated. The Council's belief in their own superiority was about to be shattered. They were about to face an enemy they never saw coming. Earth's humble beginnings, its supposed weakness, would be the very reason it triumphed. What they thought was a peaceful, insignificant world was now rising up to become the greatest challenge the galaxy had ever known. And so, as Earth's secret fleet powered up and began its journey to confront the Council, the universe held its breath. The war was no longer just a matter of defense. It was the dawn of a new era, the first strike. The Galactic Council's fleets, proud and powerful, surged toward Earth with unstoppable force. The leaders of the Council were confident their victory was assured. With centuries of peace behind them, they believed they had seen every threat the galaxy could offer. Nothing had ever truly challenged them, and nothing, they thought, would change that now. But they had grossly underestimated one thing: the resolve and ingenuity of humanity. From the moment the first enemy ships entered Earth's space, they were met with a silence that felt unnervingly still. The stars glittered in the distance. The vast emptiness of space was broken only by the sleek, intimidating ships of the Galactic Council. Their fleets moved in unison, organized and precise, and it looked like the invasion was about to begin. But the Council had overlooked something. They failed to realize that every military strategist and general on Earth was watching. They had been preparing for this day for generations. The truth about humanity's hidden fleet had been concealed for centuries, and now, the moment of reckoning had arrived. Deep within Earth's underground command centers, officials watched as the enemy ships approached. The tension in the air was palpable. The battle would begin soon, but humanity's leaders remained calm. There was no panic, no uncertainty. They had anticipated this. Everything was in place. And then, The first wave of Earth's fleet emerged from its hidden bases, gliding out of the darkness like ghosts. The Galactic Council's commanders had no idea what they were seeing. The ships were unlike anything they had ever encountered before. They were sleek, cutting-edge, and fast, designed for stealth, agility, and overwhelming power. The enemy fleet's movements were coordinated with precision, as if each ship knew exactly what to do, as if they were one mind, one force, in complete harmony. The Council's ships, confident in their size and firepower, were caught off guard by the speed and ingenuity of the human vessels. It wasn't just the design of the ships that made them dangerous. It was the advanced technology they carried. The ships weren't just weapons of war. They were intelligence-driven marvels capable of adapting to every move made by the enemy. The Council's fleets had no counter for such unpredictability. As the first shots were fired, the difference was clear. The human ships outmaneuvered the Council's vessels with ease, slipping past their defenses and launching targeted strikes that crippled key ships within the first few minutes. The battle was not one-sided, but it was no longer the Council's battle to win. The humans had a plan, and their ships were the living embodiment of that strategy. One by one, the Council's warships began to falter. Their massive dreadnoughts, typically the terror of the galaxy, were caught in a deadly trap they had not seen coming. Earth's ships used their speed and agility to target weak points, delivering devastating blows that sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet. It wasn't just the weapons that were surprising. It was the tactics that were being employed. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council's fleets were on the defensive. What was supposed to be a swift and easy invasion had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. The commanding officers on the Council's ships scrambled to issue orders, but it was too late. The human ships were everywhere. Every corner of space that had been cleared for the invasion was now contested. And then, the true power of humanity's fleet was revealed. Hidden in the heart of Earth's fleet was a new technology, an energy weapon capable of emitting a concentrated blast powerful enough to cripple even the largest of warships. The Council's commanders, oblivious to this new weapon, were caught completely off guard when the first blast hit. The energy blast tore through a massive Council dreadnought, ripping it apart in an instant. The shockwave rippled through the fleet, creating chaos and confusion. The once proud Council warships, all standing together in a unified force, were now scrambling to regain control of the situation. The humans didn't stop there. Their ships, coordinated by highly advanced AI systems, quickly adapted to the Council's tactics and launched a second wave of attacks. Earth's fleet wasn't just a defensive force. It was a hunting pack, relentless and intelligent, driven by a thirst for justice and a need to defend their world. Back on Earth, every television screen, every communication device across the planet was flooded with reports of the battle. The world watched in shock as the enemy fleet was pushed back, as humanity's secret weapon rose to the occasion. People across Earth stood in awe of what their species had achieved. The myth of human weakness was shattered, and a new era had begun. Meanwhile, within the Galactic Council's command centers, panic began to set in. What had started as a calculated invasion was quickly spiraling out of control. The humans were not the easy targets they had expected. They were not primitive, weak, or disorganized. They were warriors. They were a species united by a shared history, a species that had faced extinction before and come out stronger. And now they were fighting for their survival, with a power and precision the Council had never seen before. The first strike had been delivered, and the battle was far from over. But one thing was certain. The Galactic Council would never again underestimate humanity, and the galaxy would never forget the day Earth revealed its true strength. The turning tide. The battle raged on, but Earth's unexpected victory in the opening skirmish had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council, once invincible in their minds, found themselves scrambling to regroup. It was a sight none of them had ever anticipated. They had underestimated the humans, and now the full scope of their mistake was becoming clear. For the first time in millennia, the Galactic Council's fleets were not marching toward victory, but retreating. Humanity's hidden fleet, now revealed in all its deadly might, was relentless. Every time the Council thought they had the upper hand, Earth's ships adapted, struck back, and pushed them further into the depths of space. What was supposed to be a swift conquest had turned into an unthinkable struggle. The entire galaxy watched in stunned silence as reports flooded in from across the cosmos. The Council, once the unquestioned rulers of the stars, were now forced to defend themselves. And the humans, who had once been written off as a primitive species with no place in galactic politics, had risen to become a force that could not be ignored. Inside the Galactic Council's war rooms, a sense of unease had settled over the leaders. They had been blindsided, and now they had to figure out how to turn the tide of the war. The fleet commanders were under pressure, their strategies failing against an enemy they could neither predict nor control. But it wasn't just the loss of their ships that rattled the Council, it was the symbol of it all. Earth had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated, and the confidence the Council had once held was quickly eroding. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the news of their victory spread like wildfire. People across the planet were glued to their screens, witnessing the power of their fleets firsthand. Humanity, long seen as insignificant in the grand scheme of the galaxy, had just struck a mighty blow. The once dismissed Earth had not only survived, it had thrived. The fleets that had once been hidden in the shadows of their own planet were now the envy of the galaxy. Humanity had proven that it was not just a legend. It was a living, breathing power that could stand toe-to-toe with the greatest forces in the universe. But the war was far from over. The Galactic Council, though shaken, was far from defeated. And they were not about to let one small world upend the order of the galaxy. The Council's leaders, desperate to maintain control, called upon reinforcements, ships and soldiers from the furthest reaches of the galaxy. They began mobilizing their forces, desperate to crush the human resistance once and for all. The battle for Earth was about to escalate into something far greater than anyone had anticipated. With every passing day, the stakes grew higher. Earth's fleets, their morale stronger than ever, prepared for the next phase of the war. They had proven themselves, but the true test of their strength was yet to come. In the command center of Earth's fleet, the mood was tense but determined. The leaders of humanity were well aware that the Council would not give up easily. They had to prepare for a counterattack, a response from a galaxy that had no interest in seeing humans thrive. But the Earth fleet was ready. They had no other choice. This war wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving to the universe that humanity belonged. The preparations began in secret. A new weapon, one that could change the course of the war, was being developed. Engineers and scientists worked day and night, driven by the knowledge that their world's future depended on it. This weapon, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, had the potential to shift the balance of power. And once it was ready, humanity would strike a blow that the Galactic Council would never forget. As Earth's forces prepared for the next round of combat, the Council's commanders braced themselves for the inevitable. They knew the humans would not go down easily, and they were starting to realize the full extent of the power Earth had at its disposal. The story of humanity was no longer one of underdogs and myth. It was a story of strength, of resilience, and of a species that would not bend to the will of those who sought to dominate them. But as the battle continued, the question remained, would humanity's newfound power be enough to push back the Galactic Council's might? Or would this conflict escalate into a war that would ravage the galaxy, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake? The next phase of the war was approaching, and neither side would stop until victory was theirs. The counterattack. The war had already shattered the fragile peace that had existed for millennia. The Galactic Council, once confident in their overwhelming dominance, now found themselves in a desperate struggle against humanity. Earth had proven itself to be no mere myth, and the rest of the galaxy had begun to see the truth. They had underestimated humanity's resolve. The tension was unbearable as the Council's war rooms buzzed with activity. Messages were sent across the stars, summoning every available ship, every fleet, and every soldier to prepare for the next phase of the war. The Council was now focused on one goal: crush Earth's resistance once and for all. Their arrogance had cost them dearly, but they still held a formidable arsenal. They believed that with the full force of their empire, humanity's momentary victory could be erased. Yet, what the Council didn't anticipate was the human spirit, unyielding, creative, and resourceful. As the Galactic Empire made its preparations for the grand counterattack, Earth's forces were not standing idly by. They had been anticipating this moment and had something far more powerful in their hands than just numbers. They had ingenuity. In the depths of Earth's top-secret research facilities, scientists and military leaders were working tirelessly on a weapon that could alter the very course of the war. The weapon, a ship like no other, had the potential to turn the tide against the Council's might. It was a fusion of technology that the galaxy had never seen before, a testament to humanity's willpower and creativity. In orbit above Earth, fleet commanders knew their time was running out. With each passing day, more Council reinforcements were arriving. Massive ships and troops eager to erase the stain of defeat from the galactic map. Humanity, despite its new fleet and the surprising success in previous skirmishes, was facing an uphill battle. Earth's forces were not as vast as the Council's, and their warships, while powerful, were not invincible. But this time, it wasn't just the size of the fleet that mattered. Earth had proven that it had something far more important: strategy. On the surface of the planet, the mood was grim but resolute. Humans had become accustomed to the pressure, the constant threat, and the fight for survival. They had seen their cities destroyed, their families ripped apart by the Galactic War. But the people of Earth had also seen something else: their collective strength. Unity was their weapon. In the quiet moments before battle, Earth's fleet gathered together, each captain knowing that the fate of their species rested on their shoulders. They were prepared for the counterattack. They had a plan, and it was audacious. The fleet commanders knew that to win, they had to outsmart the Council, not outfight them. Humanity had no illusions of winning a conventional war with sheer firepower, but that had never been the human way. Instead, Earth's strategy relied on their creativity, their ability to think outside the box, and most importantly, their willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. The moment arrived. The Galactic Council's fleets entered Earth's solar system, their massive ships dwarfing anything humanity had ever fielded. The battle began as anticipated. Earth's forces, though formidable, were clearly outnumbered. Yet the humans fought with a fury that caught the Council off guard. The warships glided through space, evasive and swift, as if they had a mind of their own, responding faster than the Council could predict. But this was only the beginning. As the battle raged, Earth's secret weapon, the one they had been building in the shadows, finally emerged from the depths of their military research base. It was a ship unlike any other, a behemoth of technology, powered by an energy source the galaxy had never witnessed. Its presence alone sent shockwaves through the Council's fleets. This new ship wasn't just a symbol of Earth's strength. It was a declaration that humanity would not simply fade away into the history books as a forgotten species. The Council's commanders stared at the ship in disbelief. It moved with an almost supernatural grace, dodging their attacks, countering with precision, and striking with the kind of force that only humanity could wield. The war had just escalated to an entirely new level. The unexpected appearance of this powerful weapon was enough to send the Council into disarray. Even though their fleets were massive and their ships technologically advanced, the sheer unpredictability of Earth's tactics left them floundering. This was a battle of wits, and for the first time in this war, the Galactic Council realized they were playing catch-up. Back on Earth, the people watched with bated breath. Their victory was far from assured, but they had sent a clear message. Earth was not just fighting to survive. It was fighting to win. And with every passing moment, The Council's grip on the galaxy weakened. But this was not the end. The counterattack had begun, and the Council, although shaken, would not stop until their dominance was reestablished. The real test was still ahead, and both sides knew that only one could come out victorious. Humanity had shown that they would not go down without a fight, but would their ingenuity, their creativity, and their unity be enough to hold back the full might of the Galactic Council? The answer to that question would determine the future of the galaxy, and perhaps the very existence of humankind itself. The final stand. The Galactic Council had never expected the war to reach this point. After centuries of ruling with iron fists, they had thought humanity was just a fleeting memory, nothing more than an old myth. But now, standing on the precipice of a new galactic order, they found themselves facing a foe unlike any they had ever encountered. The tide of battle had turned in humanity's favor, and the Galactic Council's once unshakable dominance was now crumbling. Earth's new weapon, the colossal ship that had emerged from the shadows, had proven to be more than just a symbol of human defiance. It was a harbinger of something far more dangerous, a species that had been underestimated for far too long. The ship, now fully operational, struck with deadly precision, cutting through the Council's fleets as though they were nothing more than paper targets. Every blast from its weapons sent shockwaves through space, leaving the enemy forces reeling. But even as the Council's fleets faltered, they were not ready to admit defeat. Their commanders scrambled to regroup, desperate to find a way to counter Earth's new weapon, but it was clear that the balance had shifted. Humanity was not fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for victory. The final battle loomed on the horizon. The Galactic Council had gathered their last remaining forces for one final push to crush Earth's resistance. The fate of the galaxy, they believed, could still be turned in their favor with a decisive strike. But they underestimated one thing: the spirit of humanity. Across the globe, Earth's leaders and military commanders prepared for the ultimate confrontation. The people of Earth, who had long lived in the shadow of galactic powers, now stood united as never before. Every citizen, from the youngest to the oldest, knew that this was the moment that would define their future. Humanity's strength wasn't just in their weapons or their ships. It was in their unity, their determination, and their refusal to back down in the face of impossible odds. As the Galactic Council's final fleet approached Earth, humanity's forces moved into position. It was a sight that sent chills through the ranks of the Council. A fleet of ships, old and new, small and large, each representing a different part of Earth's ingenuity and willpower, stood ready to face their enemies. Every ship had a purpose, every captain knew their role, and every crew member was prepared for the battle of their lives. The Council's final assault began with a barrage of heavy fire, launching thousands of missiles and energy blasts towards Earth. But humanity had anticipated this. As the weapons rained down, Earth's fleets moved with precision, evading and countering, using the environment to their advantage. The battle played out like a deadly dance, with each side trying to outsmart the other. But what the Council couldn't predict was how Earth's ships worked together. The humans used their vast networks to communicate, share information, and anticipate the enemy's moves. As the battle intensified, Earth's ultimate weapon, the colossal ship, charged forward, its massive guns firing at the Council's flagship. It was a symbol of everything Earth had fought for, a testament to human resilience. The blast struck the flagship dead center, causing a massive explosion that shook the very fabric of space. The Council's forces, stunned by the sheer force of the attack, began to scatter, their once proud fleets disintegrating under the relentless barrage. The Galactic Council had been defeated. The once mighty empire, which had dominated the galaxy for centuries, now lay in ruins. Humanity had emerged victorious, proving that no matter how long they had been forgotten, no matter how much they had been underestimated, they were more than capable of shaping their own destiny. As Earth's fleet stood victorious, the galaxy watched in awe. The Council's defeat was not just a victory for humanity. It was a message to every species in the galaxy. Never underestimate the power of a species that refuses to be forgotten. The balance of power had shifted, and the Galactic Council's reign had come to an end. But the war had left its scars. Many lives had been lost, entire worlds had been ravaged, and the cost of victory weighed heavily on Earth. Yet, humanity stood proud. They had survived against all odds, and now they were poised to lead the galaxy into a new era. The journey had been long and hard, but humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer uncertain. They had proven that even after 3,000 years of peace, when the galaxy thought they were nothing but a legend, they were the force that could not be ignored. Earth had stood tall against the might of the Galactic Council, and in doing so, had earned its place as one of the most powerful forces in the universe. With the victory secured, Earth's leaders turned their attention to the future. They knew that there would always be challenges ahead, but they were no longer the meek species hiding in the shadows. They had earned the respect of the galaxy, and now they would set the course for the next chapter in their history. And so, the story of humanity continued, not as a forgotten legend, but as the new power that would shape the destiny of the stars. The galaxy had known peace for a long time. The great Galactic Empire, with its fleet of invincible warships, had swept through star systems and crushed rebellions with ease. No one dared challenge them. Their grip on the galaxy seemed unshakable, and their enemies lived in fear. But that peace was shattered in an instant. In a distant star system on the outer rim of the galaxy, a small planet, once forgotten by most of the universe, was under siege. The planet, called Earth, was not known for its advanced technology or military power. In fact, it had been left alone for centuries, its inhabitants barely aware of the galactic conflicts raging in the distant reaches of space. But all of that was about to change. The Empire's fleet arrived unexpectedly. Thousands of ships, massive and heavily armed, descended upon the planet. Their mission was clear: to take Earth for themselves, to harvest its resources, and to establish their dominance over this insignificant world. The Galactic Empire had no idea what was coming. The first strike was swift and brutal. The Empire's fleet opened fire on Earth's outer defenses, obliterating satellites and communication stations in seconds. But Earth had a secret that even the Empire could not have foreseen. Deep within the planet's core, humanity had been preparing for a day like this. They had been watching, waiting, quietly building a force strong enough to defend themselves. And now that day had come. As the Empire's ships rained fire upon Earth, something unexpected happened. A single powerful transmission was sent from the planet's surface. It was intercepted by the Empire's flagship, the Imperium, a massive vessel commanded by Grand Admiral Varen. The message was brief but clear: stay away from Earth, or face the consequences. Varen scoffed at the message. He had dealt with countless civilizations. None of them had ever dared to threaten the might of the Empire. To him, this message was nothing more than the desperate cry of a primitive world. He ordered his fleet to continue their bombardment. Earth would fall, just like every other planet before it. But as the Empire's ships continued their assault, something strange began to happen. On Earth, hidden deep within its oceans, underground bases, and long-forgotten bunkers, humanity's last line of defense was activated. Massive, silent warships, sleek and powerful, emerged from their secret stations. The Empire had no idea. At first, the Empire's sensors detected nothing. But as the seconds ticked by, the enemy fleet began to feel a strange disturbance in the force field around Earth. A fleet, human in design, yet unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered, emerged from the planet's surface, its weapon systems already charged. The human ships were a sight to behold. Unlike the massive, slow-moving dreadnoughts of the Empire, Earth's ships were sleek, fast, and precise. Their technology was unlike anything the Empire had seen before, advanced beyond their comprehension. The ships were equipped with energy shields that could withstand even the Empire's most powerful weapons. And their weapons? deadly beyond belief. Grand Admiral Varen watched in disbelief as one of the human warships fired a powerful beam of energy, cutting through the hull of an Empire cruiser like it was made of paper. The cruiser exploded in a flash of light, debris scattering across space. Impossible, Varen muttered under his breath. His fleet had never been challenged like this. These humans, they were not like the other primitive species the Empire had conquered. These humans were different. They had something the Empire had never faced before: desperation, ingenuity, and the will to fight for their home. The battle was on. The Empire's fleet, once so confident, now found itself struggling against the humans' powerful, fast-moving warships. The humans fought with a relentless fury, their ships darting in and out of the battle, hitting the Empire's ships with precise, devastating attacks. The Empire's forces, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer numbers, were being picked off one by one. Grand Admiral Varen's eyes narrowed as he watched the carnage unfold. This was not how he had imagined this battle. These humans were not the easy target he had assumed they would be. They were unpredictable, resourceful, and unwilling to back down. And as the battle raged on, it became clear that the Empire was losing ground. The human ships continued to strike from every angle, their advanced technology and tactics proving far superior to the Empire's. And then, just as it seemed the battle might tip in humanity's favor, Varen made a desperate decision. He activated the Empire's most powerful weapon, the Doomsday Cannon, a weapon capable of destroying entire planets in a single shot. With it, he believed, he could wipe out the entire human fleet in one fell swoop. As the Doomsday Cannon charged up, Varen watched the human ships move in for another strike. The humans didn't know what was coming. They didn't know that the fate of their world now rested on a single shot. The tension in the air was thick. If Varen's weapon succeeded, Earth would be no more. If the humans were able to stop it, the Empire's reign of terror would come to an end. The first strike was just the beginning. The battle raged on, its intensity growing with every passing second. The once untouchable Galactic Empire was beginning to feel the pressure. Their ships, towering and menacing, now seemed small and vulnerable in the face of the lightning-fast human warships. Humanity's fleet, built in secret over decades, was proving to be a terrifying force, unlike anything the Empire had ever seen before. Grand Admiral Varen stood on the bridge of the Imperium, his hands tightly gripping the railing as he watched the chaos unfold on the holoscreen. He had seen countless battles in his long career, but never had he faced such an unpredictable enemy. The human ships were agile, dodging blasts with ease, and their weapons tore through the Empire's fleet with terrifying precision. It was clear now that this was not going to be an easy victory. "Activate the secondary shields," Varen barked, his voice cold but filled with urgency. "We cannot allow them to breach the outer perimeter." His officers scrambled to carry out his orders, but even as they did, the human ships seemed to grow bolder. They attacked in small, coordinated groups, constantly shifting and changing positions. The Empire's fleet, with its heavy, lumbering ships, was struggling to keep up. The first human strike had been a fluke, Varen told himself. He refused to believe that these primitive humans could hold their own for long. They were simply using speed and surprise, an advantage that would soon run out. But as time went on, Varen's confidence began to crack. A human ship darted through the Empire's defensive perimeter, its weapons firing with deadly accuracy. The Victory class, a heavily armored Empire cruiser, took a direct hit. The ship shuddered violently, its outer shields buckling under the force of the blast. Moments later, the Victory class exploded, its massive frame disintegrating into a ball of fire and debris. "Report," Varen snapped, turning to his communications officer. "We've lost the Victory class, sir," the officer replied, his voice trembling. "It was a direct hit to the reactor. We can't recover it." Varen's fists clenched. The loss of a ship of that caliber was devastating. But it wasn't just the loss of a vessel. It was a blow to their confidence, a crack in the Empire's once invincible image. "Damn these humans," Varen muttered under his breath. Meanwhile, on the surface of Earth, the humans were mobilizing in full force. The planet's leaders had received word that the Empire's invasion was no longer a simple skirmish, it was a full-scale war. But what the Galactic Empire didn't know was that the people of Earth had been preparing for this moment for years. The Earth's top military commanders had known that one day their peaceful existence would be threatened, and when that day arrived, humanity would not go down without a fight. General Marcus Grant, one of Earth's most respected military leaders, stood in the command center of the Eagle Fleet, a massive warship that had been the backbone of Earth's secret defense program. As he watched the holographic map of the battle unfold, his mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy with seemingly endless resources. But humanity had one advantage the Empire did not. They were fighting for their home. "We can't hold them off forever," General Grant said grimly, his eyes fixed on the battlefield. "But we don't need to. We just need to keep them distracted long enough for the final phase to begin." His second-in-command, Commander Celine Huxley, looked at him with a mix of uncertainty and determination. "The final phase? You mean?" Grant nodded. "Yes, it's time to bring out the last resort." Meanwhile, in the heart of the Empire's fleet, Varen watched as more human ships seemed to appear from nowhere. They were relentless, striking and retreating in a blur. It was as if they had no fear. Every move they made only made the Empire's fleet look slower, weaker. Varen was becoming desperate. "Admiral," a subordinate interrupted, "the human fleet has activated something. Some kind of energy field. Our weapons aren't penetrating their shields. We can't." Before the officer could finish, the Imperium shook violently, throwing everyone off balance. Red lights flashed on the bridge as the ship's outer shields flared with a tremendous burst of energy. "Status report," Varen demanded. "We've been hit by an EMP pulse, sir," the officer reported, struggling to regain his composure. "It's disabling all non-essential systems." Varen's eyes widened. An EMP pulse? How could the humans have developed such a weapon? His mind raced. The Empire's ships were designed to withstand conventional attacks. But this was something new, something beyond anything they had prepared for. Another explosion rocked the Imperium, sending sparks flying across the bridge. The crew scrambled to maintain control, but Varen knew they were losing the upper hand. The humans weren't just defending their planet. They were turning the tide of the battle. He turned to his weapons officer. "Activate the Doomsday Cannon. I don't care what it takes. If we can't crush these humans, we'll make sure they never rise again." As the Doomsday Cannon began to power up, Varen's mind raced. This was their final chance. If the humans could destroy this weapon, it was over. But if the Empire succeeded, the entire galaxy would fall under their control. Back on Earth, General Grant watched as the holographic map shifted. He knew the Empire's next move, the Doomsday Cannon. They had one chance to stop it, and it would come down to one final desperate gamble. The Galactic Empire's Doomsday Cannon powered up, its massive energy core glowing ominously. A weapon of unimaginable destruction, it was capable of erasing entire planets in a single concentrated blast. For centuries, the Empire had been the terror of the galaxy, its forces unchallenged. But now, faced with the unthinkable, an enemy that wasn't backing down, their final weapon was the last card left to play. Admiral Varen stood on the bridge of the Imperium, his face grim as he watched the readings on the holoscreen. The weapon was nearly ready. His fingers hovered over the control panel. A single command would launch the cannon, and the human fleet would be wiped out in an instant. But his mind raced. The humans had already shown they could adapt, could surprise him. What if they had a countermeasure? What if they were prepared for this? "Admiral," one of his officers said, interrupting his thoughts. "The human fleet has begun to shift its formation. They're grouping up around the Eagle Fleet." Varen's brow furrowed. "What are they doing?" "It looks like they're preparing to." The officer didn't finish the sentence. A violent tremor shook the Imperium, followed by the ominous sound of several impact hits. The ship's shields flickered, struggling to keep up with the incoming fire. "They're attacking us," Varen roared. "Full power to shields. Don't let them break through." But even as he issued the order, the human fleet's coordinated strikes began to make a noticeable dent in the Empire's defenses. The humans weren't retreating. They were pushing forward, even as their ships took hits. Their tactic was bold, audacious, and for the first time in a long while, Varen felt a flicker of doubt. On Earth, General Marcus Grant watched the battle unfold on his own command center screen. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the desk. The Doomsday Cannon was nearing full power, and there was no way to stop it, unless they acted quickly. They needed more time. "Celine," he said, his voice low and tight, "get the fleet into position. We need to keep them occupied, distract them long enough for the final phase to begin." Commander Celine Huxley nodded, her face reflecting the weight of the situation. "Are you sure about this? If we fail?" Grant looked her in the eye, the weight of leadership pressing down on him. "We don't have a choice. We have to gamble everything on this final strike. We either stop the cannon, or the Empire wins." With no more words to say, Celine turned to her communication officers. "Relay the order to all units. Prepare for the final assault. We hit them with everything we've got." Across the battlefield, the Eagle fleet began to move into position. They knew they were up against a weapon unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, but they also knew something Varen, and the Empire didn't. The humans had a secret, a weapon of their own, something hidden in the depths of their fleet. It wasn't just about strength. It was about timing, precision, and an undying resolve. The human ships moved as one, quickly repositioning and dodging the Empire's heavy fire. The Doomsday Cannon glowed even brighter, ready to fire, but it had not yet reached its full power. The Empire's ships tried to track the humans' erratic movements, but they were simply too fast, too unpredictable. Grant could see it now. The Empire's arrogance had blinded them. They thought their power was unbeatable, but they had underestimated the will of humans. No matter the odds, no matter the danger, humans never gave up. And now, they were pushing to the edge of victory. "We're almost there," Grant muttered to himself as his hands hovered over a console. "We just need to hold them off long enough." Varen clenched his teeth, watching his shields flicker. The humans were relentless, firing from all angles. But still, the Doomsday Cannon continued to charge. It would be ready in moments. Then this stubborn resistance would end. Suddenly, the sensors on the Imperium lit up, signaling something unexpected. A series of strange readings came through the command center. Varen's eyes narrowed. He'd seen this kind of reading before, a type of electromagnetic signature. It could only mean one thing. EMP. "They're deploying an EMP weapon," Varen shouted. His officers scrambled, trying to get the ship into a better position, but it was too late. A massive pulse of energy erupted from the Eagle fleet, a wave of destruction that washed over the Empire's ships. The Imperium trembled as its systems began to fail. Shields flickered, weapons systems went offline, and the once mighty ship began to drift helplessly. "No," Varen shouted, slamming his fist on the console. "Get those systems back online. Now." But the damage was done. The humans had struck. The once impenetrable defenses of the Galactic Empire were now compromised. Varen's gaze locked onto the charging Doomsday Cannon, now little more than an ominous symbol of the Empire's desperation. He had no idea how the humans had managed to deploy such a weapon, but they had done it. And now, the Empire was on the verge of losing everything. On Earth, Grant looked at the flickering map in front of him, watching as the Doomsday Cannon began to fail. The Empire was reeling, and the balance of power was shifting. But it wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. "Prepare the final strike," Grant said, his voice resolute. "This ends now." As the battle continued, The galaxy hung in the balance. The humans had struck a blow that shook the Empire to its core. But the question remained, could they deliver the final blow? Would humanity's gamble pay off, or would the Empire's revenge be swift and merciless? The clock was ticking. The Empire's doom was near, but victory wasn't guaranteed yet. The humans had one final chance. The tension reached its peak, leaving the audience desperate for what would happen next. The stakes were higher than ever. The fate of the galaxy would soon be decided. The Doomsday Cannon had been temporarily neutralized, but the battle was far from over. Despite the crippling EMP strike, the Galactic Empire's resilience showed in the aftermath. Admiral Varen, though frustrated and momentarily stunned, was a seasoned strategist. He knew how to regroup, how to adapt when the odds seemed against him. The Empire had faced many challenges before, and it had always emerged victorious. This would be no different. Reboot all systems. We're not done yet. Varen barked, his voice cold and calculating. The humans think they've won, but they've only delayed the inevitable. All ships, prepare for counteroffensive. Varen's command rang out like a rallying cry. Officers scrambled, systems rebooted, and the fleet's weapons began to come back online. The Imperium was ready for round 2. On the other side of the battlefield, General Marcus Grant watched with a furrowed brow as the Empire's fleet began to regroup. The human forces were still strong, but they had taken heavy losses, and their remaining resources were dwindling. The battle was turning into a brutal test of endurance. The Eagle Fleet, once a symbol of humanity's defiance, was now a shadow of its former self. Several ships had been critically damaged, and their shields were starting to fail. The humans had no intention of retreating, but they knew the next few minutes could decide everything. If the Doomsday Cannon was reactivated, humanity would lose. There was no time to waste. "Commander Huxley," Grant called, his voice steady but urgent, "can we hold them off long enough to finish the plan?" Huxley, her face etched with the tension of the moment, met his gaze. "We can, but just barely. If we don't launch the final strike now, we won't have another chance." Grant nodded. The plan was simple yet dangerous. They would use every last ship, every last resource to buy enough time for the final weapon. It was humanity's last hope. "Prepare the final assault," Grant ordered. "No more second chances. Give them everything we've got." Meanwhile, in the heart of the Imperium, Varen smiled grimly as his fleet reformed. His forces had taken a hit, but they were far from finished. His eyes flicked toward the now reactivated Doomsday Cannon. It had taken a moment to reboot, but the weapon was functional again. It was now or never. The Galactic Empire's counteroffensive began. A barrage of plasma fire erupted from their ships, lighting up the battlefield as the humans desperately tried to regroup and form defensive formations. The humans had no choice but to engage. The Imperium had recovered, and the Empire's might was being thrown at them with full force. Grant's hands clenched around the edge of his chair as the human fleet scrambled to return fire. Their ships were taking damage faster than they could deal it, but humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The Doomsday Cannon hummed ominously, the air around it crackling with energy. The Imperium had gathered its remaining fleet into a tight formation, preparing to deliver a crushing blow to the humans. Varen's plan was simple: use the cannon to obliterate Earth's remaining fleet. The humans had taken their best shot, but now it was time for the Empire to finish this. "Ready the cannon," Varen ordered, his eyes narrowed in determination. "Prepare to fire." Back on Earth, General Grant felt a knot in his stomach as he watched the enemy fleet tighten its formation. Time was running out. The Eagle fleet couldn't hold much longer. The cannon was ready, and once it fired, the humans would have no chance of survival. But Grant wasn't ready to give up just yet. "Celine," he called, his voice calm but resolute, "are we in position?" "Almost," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "But it's going to be close." A loud alarm sounded through the Eagle fleet's command deck, and the lights flickered as another barrage of fire tore through the ships. The human vessels rocked under the weight of the Empire's relentless assault. Some ships broke apart in violent explosions, while others limped along, struggling to stay operational. "We can't take much more of this," Grant muttered, his voice barely audible. "Celine, I need those coordinates now." Celine's fingers flew across her console as she punched in the final calculations. "Coordinates locked in, General. We're ready." Grant took a deep breath. This was the moment. They had one shot. If they failed, the doomsday cannon would erase them all. But if they succeeded, launch the strike, Grant ordered, his voice echoing across the command room. Across the battlefield, the humans' final weapon, an experimental quantum pulse bomb, activated. A massive energy pulse shot out from the Eagle fleet, charging toward the Imperium's fleet at impossible speeds. The human ships, battered and bloodied, barely held their positions as the pulse surged toward the Empire's defenses. In that moment, everything went silent. The weapons fire ceased. The doomsday cannon's hum faltered. Varen looked up, his eyes widening in disbelief as the pulse collided with the Imperium's shields. The pulse overloaded the Empire's systems, sending waves of energy coursing through their ships. The doomsday cannon, the pride of the Galactic Empire, began to sputter and spark. Then, with a massive explosion, it fell silent. The mighty weapon, once the source of the Empire's dominance, was destroyed in an instant. Admiral Varen stared at the shattered remnants of the cannon, his mouth dry. His fleet, now vulnerable, was in disarray. The doomsday cannon had failed, and with it, the Empire's chances of victory had crumbled. Retreat. Varen barked, but it was too late. Humanity had done the impossible. After the destruction of the doomsday cannon, a brief silence filled the void of space. It was the first real victory humanity had tasted in the war. The Eagle fleet had delivered the blow that had shattered the Empire's seemingly invincible weapon, but this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a much darker chapter in the battle for Earth's survival. General Marcus Grant watched the darkened space before him, his thoughts racing. The doomsday cannon was gone, but that didn't mean the Empire had given up. Far from it. The Imperium fleet was retreating. But it wasn't fleeing in defeat. It was regrouping, preparing for the next phase of their assault. "We've made them bleed," Grant muttered, his eyes still locked on the view screen. "But they're not finished yet." Indeed, the Empire was far from broken. Its fleet, though shaken, was still powerful. Varen, despite the humiliating loss of his prized weapon, had lost none of his strategic brilliance. The retreat wasn't a sign of surrender. It was a tactical withdrawal to lick their wounds and prepare for the inevitable second strike. And the Eagle fleet was in no condition to face that strike head-on. Many of their ships had been heavily damaged in the assault, and though the quantum pulse bomb had delivered a devastating blow to the Empire's forces, humanity was now facing the reality of a war that had only escalated. "General," Commander Huxley said, her voice breaking through his thoughts, "we've received an encrypted transmission from Earth. It's urgent." Grant turned toward her, his brow furrowed. "What's the message?" Huxley handed him a tablet with the transmission. His eyes scanned the words, and his expression darkened. "The Council's calling for a ceasefire. They want to negotiate." "Negotiate," Grant repeated, incredulous. "We're talking about an empire that has tried to wipe us out. We can't negotiate with them." "I know, sir," Huxley responded. "But the Council says Earth can't afford another conflict. We've already lost too much, and Earth's resources are stretched thin. We need a strategy for survival, not more war." Grant slammed his fist onto the console in frustration. He knew the risks of this fight, but he also knew that humanity couldn't simply back down. If the Empire wanted Earth, it would have to go through humanity, and humanity wouldn't make it easy. "I'm not backing down. Not now, not ever," Grant said, his voice cold with determination. "We'll do what we have to do to survive. I'll be damned if I let Earth fall to the hands of those monsters." Meanwhile, in the heart of the Imperium, Admiral Varen was still reeling from the loss of the Doomsday Cannon, but he knew his fleet could still defeat humanity if he played his cards right. The battle had been lost, but the war was far from over. The Empire had the resources, the technology, and the military might to crush the humans. The retreat was only a temporary setback. He had already issued orders to reinforce the fleet, to gather the remaining ships and prepare for a decisive counteroffensive. "We will crush them," Varen muttered to himself. "We will make them regret defying us." But even as he spoke, a part of him knew that the humans had proven themselves far more dangerous than the Empire had anticipated. The destruction of the Doomsday Cannon had shaken the Empire to its core. It was the first time in history that the humans had truly stood up to their would-be conquerors and emerged victorious. And now, Varen had to rethink his strategy. Back on Earth, a different kind of pressure was building. Earth's leaders had never anticipated such a rapid escalation of war. The initial confidence in their ability to hold off the Empire had been shaken by the recent battle. And though the humans had triumphed, they knew that the Empire was not easily beaten. The Earth Command Council convened in an emergency meeting. World leaders, military commanders, and scientists gathered in a massive underground bunker beneath the ruins of what had once been a thriving capital city. "The Empire will return, and they will return with everything they have," General Kate Huxley said, her voice firm. "This is far from over. We cannot afford to be complacent." "She's right," added Dr. Elena Perez, Earth's lead strategist. "The loss of the Doomsday Cannon is significant, but the Empire has many other weapons at their disposal. The next few days are critical. If we don't act fast, we'll be overwhelmed." Grant stood up, his face grim. "We'll need to launch a preemptive strike. The Empire is wounded, but it's still powerful. We can't wait for them to come to us. We need to finish this." "But how?" Huxley asked, her voice laced with doubt. "The Eagle fleet is already stretched thin. We've lost too many ships." Grant paused, thinking for a moment. "There's one weapon the Empire doesn't know we have. A secret weapon. If we can get it to the front lines in time, we might just have a chance." The room fell silent. All eyes were on Grant. "Tell us, General," Huxley urged. "What's the weapon?" Grant's gaze hardened. "We've been working on something powerful enough to end this war. If we can deploy it before the Empire makes their next move, we might just be able to turn the tide." The suspense hung in the air. The humans had fought back with everything they had, but now they were preparing for their final gamble. Would this secret weapon be the key to humanity's survival, or would it lead them straight into the jaws of the Galactic Empire's wrath? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: humanity's war for survival was far from over. The tension in the command room was palpable. Humanity's fate rested on the brink of an uncertain future. General Marcus Grant stood at the front of the room, surrounded by military advisors, scientists, and Earth Command Council members. The map of the galaxy on the screen before them displayed the position of the Imperium fleet, its massive ships lurking just beyond the edge of the solar system. "Time is running out," Grant said, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "The Empire is regrouping faster than we anticipated. We've only got a small window to deploy our secret weapon. If we don't act now, we'll lose our advantage." Dr. Elena Perez, the lead strategist, nodded in agreement. "We've worked tirelessly to develop this new technology, but it's untested. We can't afford another mistake." "We don't have a choice," Grant replied firmly. "The Empire is about to launch their final strike. They're too powerful. If we don't hit them hard now, Earth will fall." The room fell silent. It was clear that humanity's last chance was teetering on the edge of an unknown precipice. The secret weapon was humanity's greatest hope, but also its greatest risk. No one knew for sure if it would work. There was no way to predict how the Imperium fleet would react. The balance of power in the galaxy could change forever in the next few hours. Back in space, Admiral Varen was feeling the weight of his decisions. He had just received word that the Doomsday Cannon was completely destroyed, a blow to the Imperium's prestige and military strength. But Varen was far from defeated. The destruction of the cannon was nothing more than a setback. He had more tricks up his sleeve, more weapons at his disposal. Send the order to advance, Varen commanded his fleet. We will crush them at their core. Earth's defenses are weaker than they think. The Imperium fleet began its approach toward Earth, a sea of warships stretching across the stars. Varen's confidence was unwavering. The humans had fought bravely, but they were still vastly outmatched. He would show them just how futile their resistance was. Meanwhile, General Grant and his team prepared for their own counterattack. A daring mission was underway to deploy the secret weapon into position. The weapon, codenamed Project Eclipse, was humanity's last hope. A highly experimental device, Project Eclipse harnessed the energy of a collapsing star, compressed into a small but powerful charge that could decimate anything in its path. Is everything ready for the launch? Grant asked, glancing over at Huxley and Perez. All systems are operational, Huxley responded. We'll have a clear shot in 15 minutes. Grant nodded, steeling himself for what was to come. Make sure the fleet is in position. We need to strike before they can regroup. Understood, General, Perez said, her fingers flying over the control panel. We'll need a precise window to launch. Any disruption could cause the charge to backfire. As they worked quickly to prepare for the strike, Grant couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. Project Eclipse was the culmination of years of research, a weapon born from the brink of humanity's darkest hour. Yet no one knew what the outcome would be. What if it failed? What if it didn't deliver the promised results? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. They had no backup plan. This was it. Minutes later, the transmission came through. General, we've detected the fleet, Huxley reported. The Imperium fleet is advancing on Earth at full speed. They'll be in range in just under an hour. Grant's heart raced. Prepare to launch the weapon. Now. All eyes in the command room were on the massive screen as the countdown to launch began. Every second was critical, every moment filled with unbearable suspense. Project Eclipse was humanity's last chance to turn the tide of war. On the battlefield, the Imperium fleet moved like a storm, relentless and overwhelming. Varen's eyes glinted with cold confidence as his ships closed in on Earth. The humans had been foolish to defy the Empire. They would pay the price for their arrogance. Launch the attack, Varen commanded. Make them regret their defiance. As the Imperium fleet launched its first wave of devastating weapons toward Earth, General Grant watched in grim determination. Launch Project Eclipse now, he ordered. A massive explosion rang out from the Earth's outer orbit as Project Eclipse rocketed into space. The weapon, a gleaming orb of pure energy, hurtled toward the advancing Imperium fleet, its destructive power ready to reshape the course of the war. The countdown was nearly complete. Humanity had one final chance. Would Project Eclipse succeed in wiping out the Imperium fleet? Would the human race survive this desperate battle? Time seemed to stand still. As the first blast from the Imperium fleet collided with Earth's atmosphere, a blinding flash of light erupted from the edge of the solar system. Project Eclipse had made contact. The room fell silent as everyone awaited the outcome. Would this be the end of humanity's struggle for survival, or would Earth's unexpected weapon turn the tide of the war? The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The silence in the command room was deafening. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. All eyes were fixed on the large screens, watching for any sign of the explosion that would either signal humanity's salvation or its final, crushing defeat. The seconds stretched into eternity as they waited, breath held, for the results of Project Eclipse. General Marcus Grant's gaze was locked on the main monitor. The weapon had launched perfectly, the shimmering orb of compressed energy hurtling toward the Imperium fleet. But the real question was, would it work? Could humanity's secret weapon be enough to overcome the massive force of the Empire's fleet? The room's tension broke when the first of the distant sensors lit up with an incoming signal. A low hum filled the air, followed by an eerie silence. "Did it hit?" Dr. Elena Perez asked, her voice barely a whisper. Grant clenched his fists, his knuckles white. "We'll find out soon enough." Then the explosion came. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The Project Eclipse charge detonated in the vacuum of space, sending out a shockwave that rippled across the cosmos. The force of the blast illuminated the sky, turning the dark void of space into a brilliant spectacle of light and fire. The shockwave sent tremors through the very fabric of space itself. The Imperium fleet was caught in the blast radius. Ships that had been mere moments ago unstoppable giants of war now exploded in flashes of fire and metal. The Eclipse energy tore through their ranks like a wrecking ball, vaporizing their shields and obliterating entire fleets in an instant. The Empire's ships were scattered, torn apart, their once proud structures reduced to floating debris. Grant's eyes widened as he saw the unthinkable happen on the monitor. The Imperium fleet, once considered an unstoppable force, was no longer a threat. Its massive warships, its advanced technology, its endless firepower, all reduced to little more than space junk. "It worked," Perez said, her voice breaking through the silence in the room. But even as the victorious image of the Imperium fleet in disarray appeared on the monitors, Grant couldn't bring himself to feel relief. This wasn't over. The Empire might have been beaten back, but the war was far from won. The destruction of the Imperium fleet was a huge blow, but it was only the first step. The Empire would return, and when they did, humanity would need to be ready. "We've won this battle," Grant said slowly, his voice steady but filled with caution. "But the war is far from over. We've just shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of, but we've also drawn a line in the sand. The Empire will not forget this." Perez turned to him, her face pale but resolute. "We've sent a message, General. A powerful message. The Imperium fleet underestimated us. They thought they were invincible. They won't make that mistake again. But will we be ready for what's coming next?" Grant's question hung heavy in the air. Despite their victory, a nagging fear lingered at the back of his mind. What would the Empire do now that they knew what humanity was capable of? The ship's sensors detected something new. A massive ship, far larger than anything they had ever seen, approaching the solar system at incredible speed. It was not part of the Imperium fleet they had just destroyed, but a ship that seemed to defy all known classification. The Empire had something else in reserve. The war was not over. It was only just beginning. On the Imperium's homeworld, Admiral Varen watched the reports of the Project Eclipse destruction with cold fury. He clenched his fists as he stared at the images of the shattered fleet. But in his eyes, there was no panic, only a quiet determination. "They've revealed their strength," Varen said to his officers, his voice low and dangerous. "But we will not let them have the last word. Send the order to deploy Legion 12. Prepare for a new phase of the war." Back on Earth, General Grant felt the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. The battle they had won had been a turning point, but the real war was just beginning. They had taken the first steps towards securing humanity's survival, but now they had to prepare for the inevitable retaliation from the Empire. "Get the fleet into formation," Grant commanded. "We're not done yet." The war was far from over. The Imperium had seen just a glimpse of the power humanity possessed, and they were coming back for more. As the galaxy braced for what was to come, one thing was certain. Humanity had just declared its place in the stars. The Empire might have been terrifying, but now they knew the humans were not to be underestimated. The final countdown had begun. The fate of the galaxy rested on the outcome of this war, and humanity was ready to show the universe what it could do.